Hi guys, I'm Shmi, hello and welcome back to the channel. Good morning from Strasbourg in France, where it's time for the last leg, the final drive of the SF90 Winter Tour. We're heading back home, about 500 miles on the road with some stops along the way, but I want to have a bit of a recap about this car, including one little hiccup we need to talk about and something that will need to be looked at when we get back home as well. But all in all, this has gone brilliantly, I have to be honest. Roof box, winter tyres, we've found some snow, we've been freezing cold, we've had some amazing stops, events, cars to drive, places to go, and I enjoy driving this car even more than ever. But today we're departing from here, which was actually the destination of our first leg, with quite literally driving back the opposite way. We're going to be heading via a fairly famous location along the way, then of course catching the Eurotunnel, crossing over to England and making our way back today to the Shmuseum with the SF90. We've had a few updates with the SF90 along the way, from when we left, talking about the future of the car, obviously the journey so far, and getting it into the real snow when we were driving up the Bernina Pass in Switzerland. The roof box has come in very, very handy. I know I've talked about this a lot. I was very anxious as to how exactly it would perform, but we've managed with this, with all of the stuff up there, with the sea suckers to hold it down in place. What I don't know though is what I'm going to do with this afterwards, because it would look kind of strange on any other car, given it's painted in Blu Elettrico to match the paint colour of this specifically. Obviously, at some point soon, I'll pop it back onto the summer tyres, because it's not a car that I generally am going to be driving when the weather is horrible. It's not really the car for this. We're going to need to get it washed up a second time. We went to Incute in Zurich, who gave it a first rinse down to get rid of some of the grime that was absolutely caking the thing, but there is a whole lot more in every possible nook and cranny, so we're going to have to go through that in full. Another thing I want to touch on though is the fuel economy of this thing. The MPG has been extraordinary. It's done some amazing numbers, really very, very, very impressive. So I'm going to calculate that for you today as well. But I think it's quite cold here and we should probably get this drive started, head out of Strasbourg and get on our way. One thing that was also done at Incute when this car was there was to clean up the leather. Now, of course, choosing to go for Sabia leather in here, it's pretty light and it gets pretty dirty, especially these floor mats. And they did a bit of a 50-50, which looked amazing, just to see how much cleaner it can be. Anyway, let me step in here. It's a very comfortable car for this kind of journey. We will get this started. In fact, close the door and start to warm up a touch before driving out of Strasbourg in electric. When you start it, we're in hybrid mode. I really enjoy going into electric, honestly. I know it sounds strange because there's a lovely V8 behind us, but to just drive quietly and calmly it's kind of priceless sometimes. Just got a car behind me at the moment. Wait, let's come through. It's really, really pleasant. And this car in particular does it so nicely. Now, when we get the cold start shortly, because it hasn't been started yet this morning, you'll hear a whole lot of noise from that. This guy just came running over when he saw the car. So I guess it stands out a bit, but we'll make our way out from this beautiful square here in Strasbourg, beside the church just there, and go and try and work out which way the nav's taking me. Yes, I got it right. This is the right way to go for our first stop, which is in 350 kilometers, a little over 3 hours from here. I've only come here for like one night stops, but it's actually a really pretty city. There's a lot to see, and obviously there is a certain car manufacturer nearby who we have not been to visit this time, but maybe next time, because there's probably some cool stuff to see there. Before we get too far out of town, let me press performance. There we go, get this started, working out which way to go. Am I in the right lane? Yes. We've got the cold start of the engine. It always just takes a second. I spoke about that before. It's best to get it started when you're stationary, but I don't like to start it in the city because I find it fun to kind of exit the city quietly rather than firing it up on a morning departure. You can probably see roughly where I'm coming from, but it should be fairly easy going today. We've got our télépéage for the French autoroutes. It shouldn't be too busy along the way, I would imagine. And like I say, I want to touch a bit more on some of the details of fuel economy because I find it fascinating, given we're driving a 1,000 horsepower Ferrari, just finished the cold start cycle, and then also tell you about this one little hiccup, confusing thing that the car is doing. Well, fast forward about 4 hours and we have ventured off the main auto route to a venue just down this way in the haze on what has turned out to be a beautiful day for driving. In fact, I haven't actually been here for around a year and a half. The last stop that we did here was on the Black Series tour with the GT Black Series, SLS Black Series, C63 Black Series, and of course the G63 when we were making our way over towards AMG in a Falterback. This time around though, we're heading here because it's right off the main route. If you're going to or from the south of France or the Alps or even into Germany or wherever it might be, and this is a place steeped in automotive history. You can just make out in the haze the grandstand on the left, the pit lane on the right of what was, back in the 1950s and 60s, the French Formula One Grand Prix venue. It hosted 11 Grand Prix back then. It opened around a century ago, just shy of 100 years ago, actually closed 51 years ago in 1972. But literally this was the straight that you would drive on the F1. The F1 cars would come flying down here, and I think on the right over there, is that a red Audi R8? Probably. This is so cool. It's like a time capsule. It's amazing to just see as we're going to drive past. Look at this. The pit lanes, everything about this place. So cool. Let me just slide in here. What a place. I love it. Let's hop out for a second. Well, that's not a stock exhaust on the R8 V10. What a sound, especially with the buildings here. And a group of other cars from the UK that are on their way down to a track day. All here as well. We've got the Alpine, an M4 and a Z4. Very blue, 4 blue cars in a row lined up there. Out they all head, onwards on their outbound journey through France. It's just crazy to think that this was the straight over 2 kilometers with cars back then in the 50s, in the 60s, blasting down here, past the grandstands. You hear the echoes back off all of the concrete around us. This place is just, like I said, it's a time capsule. It's amazing to see, and it's such a lovely day to be here, but there's a long journey ahead of us. It's still a couple of hours from here to Calais to catch the Eurotunnel, which we'd like to do in daylight if we can. So we're going to hop back in the car, get the journey continued, because I've still got a lot to fill you guys in on when it comes to the fuel economy side of things, and also what's going on with the car, because that's actually getting more peculiar as we go at the moment. One thing you have to watch here is the bottom of the door, which is super low in this car, and that's definitely been a close call on a few occasions. The other thing is that to open the fuel filler cap, there's a button just down in here, which actually just takes a moment after I pressed it, because I think it's to do with the electrical system. I think it just takes a second to relax and chill out. Now, the tank in this car is actually really quite small, but because it's so efficient, you can go a very, very long way. We've just gone about 410 kilometers with about 130 kilometers still to go, 540 kilometers. Don't know exactly what that is in miles, but a pretty decent distance. 300 and something, I want to say 325, 330 miles off the top of my head. That's pretty normal cruising range. We're going at the speed limit everywhere. Obviously, we have the increased air resistance of this, but let me just go and put my credit card information in here and then start it filling, and I'll tell you about some of the numbers. We've got the 98 going in here. I think you can probably run it on 95, but I tend to prefer to just put in better stuff if you can. Of course, 98 RON over here is about like 93 octane in the US. Now, to give you some of the numbers, because it's genuinely interesting over the lifetime of this journey to compare it to other cars. Take my 718 Cayman GT4, my Porsche, the last Porsche I had. That would do, over the lifetime I had it, about 21.5 UK miles per gallon. UK miles per gallon are different to US miles per gallon, which are different to European systems, which is litres per 100 kilometers. Other cars, my GT500, 15.5 mpg, my GT4 Lussa, about the same. My Heritage Focus RS, over 7,000 or 8,000 miles, has done 24.3 mpg. So with a car like this, which has 1,000 horsepower, has the roof box on it, and has been driving on some mountain roads and been having some fun, and we've not been able to plug it in overnight. I've not plugged this car in to a charger once at any point on this journey. You would think a target like 17 mpg would actually be really impressive. My AMG GTR Roadster did about 18 or 19 mpg. We've only put 47 litres in there, and that's about 3/4 or so of a tank. This always needs a little top up. It cuts out way too early in this car. Never overdo it, because then you just make a complete and total mess. But to give you the scores on the doors then, the MPG this car achieves, the UK MPG of this thing, 23.5 on this trip. 23.5, that's 12 litres per 100 kilometres. 23.5 MPG. A car like this shouldn't do 23.5 MPG. My Focus RS, I just told you, did 24.3 over its lifetime. Only about, well, less than 5% more. My Cayman GT4 was worse with only 400 odd horsepower than this with 1,000. Admittedly not using 1,000, and with a roof box on the top. It's the small wins. Arguably, if you're buying an SF90, that's not your number one concern. But something about it just feels good, right? It's a nice little touch. Let me see if I can get a receipt from here. These things sometimes work, sometimes don't work. Yay, I do have a receipt. Perfect. That is exactly what I need, so we can hop back in the car and continue the last 40 minutes in the sunset. Sun about to head on down over that away to the Eurotunnel crossing to get towards England. And yeah, so far so good, to be honest. One other thing that we've noticed is how many places we've gone by have chargers being put up. Everywhere is assembling chargers, except for the UK, it seems. I don't currently have an electric car at all. Just this, which is hybrid, and the 296 GTS on order, which is also hybrid. Oh, was a big bump. That was a big aggressive bump, and this car sits very low to the ground. But yeah, it does all of this like slow speed stuff electrically, as I talked about far too much on the videos, obviously earlier in the trip. And then as soon as you give it some power, engine kicks in, and away you go. Back out onto the auto route for this last stretch. We're only half an hour from the Eurotunnel right now anyway, so it's an easy run to the end. But obviously charging infrastructures are very important for the future of EVs and being able to run an electric car comfortably. My experience of charging, as we did a trip all the way like this across Europe with the Taycan to Munich and back, was actually pretty good, finding chargers everywhere. But my experience of charging cars in the UK was not so good. I don't know if you can plug this into high-speed chargers. You must be able to in some form. I don't know if it, I mean obviously its limit is the car's charging speed, which must be like 11 kilowatts or something. No, less than that. It's not going to be able to charge fast, but the question is, can you, if you wanted to, jump 25 kilometers a time from one charger to the next? That's one to try at some point. Before we arrive at the Eurotunnel, we're following a truck from Morocco, I think. Is that plate from Morocco? I think it is. That's super unusual. That's a whole long way. Oh, and we're definitely getting some stones pinged up. So I'm going to drop back just for a moment. I'd love to drive a car to Morocco. In fact, I would love to drive the GT Black series to Morocco at some point in life, because obviously it's done the Middle East, it's done North America. I'm just going steady. Yeah, I'm sure it is. How funny is that? A long way from home. Look at the sun, or even what's going on over there through the clouds. Very cool. Very, very cool. The last leg now. Only a couple more minutes to go. Well, we've made it back to the Eurotunnel. It has been an exhausting little trip. We have covered a lot of distance, seen and driven some amazing cars, but it's now time to go and get checked in, and we've booked Flexi Plus. We're decently ahead of the booked crossing as it happens. The advantage of Flexi is that if there's a queue, you can kind of skip around it, and also if there is an earlier train, you can just jump on it. So it's going to make life very, very easy for us as we swing around here, being spotted as we go. Oh, we'll go straight through though and go and get checked in and get ready for the crossing over. This has all happened really fast. We've come straight down to the trains, literally to board. There are loads of trucks to the left. People often wonder about this. Trucks have a completely different system to what we have in the passenger cars, because trucks go in these kind of open frames. In fact, you can see some of them there, those open framed trailers just beyond, and they have to stay in their cabs, whereas we go into these enclosed passenger cabins. I'm going to use the lift system just to go up here, and obviously I have booked the tall and wide vehicles cabins, hence why we're with some of the minivans and things, even though with the roof box we're still fairly normal height, to be honest. But I'm in electric, so you probably noticed. I feel like I'm doing good driving through here, and then we'll pop out in about half an hour's time on the other side, back into England in the dark though. It will be night time. Right, time to go. I'm a little bit behind the, come on, have I done this wrong? There we go. Out we go on the English side. That was literally like, and we're there, out we go. So, I need to set everything in the car back to miles. Truck's coming from the left. But yeah, onwards. We have made it. We're back at the Shmuseum, and you know what? I'm really quite proud that this has come back in one piece. There were lots of people out there who I know were very skeptical at the idea of driving 2,000 miles around Europe with the roof box on a Ferrari being attached by suction pads. But to be honest, it's worked flawlessly. It has been completely fine. Every single time I've ever stopped anywhere, we've been around the car to check that all of the suction pads are still correctly attached. It's stayed on the roof. We've had zero issues with it whatsoever. Today, noticeably more wind noise than we had before, which I guess is just more wind, probably, at the end of the day, keeping it simple. Otherwise, it's been super easy, super smooth sailing. And because obviously it's a 1,000 horsepower car, you don't really notice it's there, apart from when you crane your neck forward and you just see the underside of it. But this is going to need a clean up. I think it's going to be easier to clean all of that properly, because if you think about it, the bars have been hitting loads of bugs and dirt and whatnot while it's still on the car. I know, as I mentioned before, I know we're going to have one thing here, which is that where these are on the PPF, there are certainly going to be permanent rings on the PPF there, which is going to need to be replaced. That's obviously the roof and the A-pillars, but I kind of knew about that from day one. I mentioned it a few times before, so I'm not too bothered by it. Just part and parcel. Better to do that than to have another potential problem. What's going to happen next with this though? Well, obviously we need to get our luggage unloaded, but what's going to happen next with my rather crazy Blu Elettrico roof box? Always got to check everything's still in there. The one that we painted at Godliman's. I wonder if it will have a new lease of life. I have to be honest, I doubt I'm going to do exactly this again. I'm probably not about to take the SF90 on another road trip with the roof box on the top. If I was going to do something similar, let's say next winter, I suspect it would be one of the other cars, Ford GT, I'm looking at you. This painted in red and gold on the GT, just because of how low it is. That could look pretty cool. It's also got quite a flat roof, so it actually fit very neatly, very smoothly. And now I've got the confidence in using it as well, which is kind of a second level of confidence, just not worrying about it. But yeah, we did well. We planned hotels all the way throughout with garages. It's been, other than one stop, it's been a new hotel every single night. One stop was for 2 nights. Lots of backwards and forward around Europe. But hey, it's been an amazing trip to film so much, to drive so much, and to enjoy the SF90. Now, I mentioned that there was one thing, and this is really bizarre. There was one thing that is a little bit, or has been a little bit wrong with the car. And would you believe where this is going to go? So a couple of days ago, it started pinging up on the dashboard that there was a passenger e-latch fault, which I presume is to do with the doors, which of course have an electronic button, electronic release just inside, and it pinged up this message on the dashboard. So I was like, uh-oh. There have been absolutely zero symptoms of it. Just every single time the passenger door has been opened, it pinged up that message for me. However, this morning, that's gone away and it hasn't come back. So it turns out that the only peculiar problem this car has now is that it's way more efficient than a 1,000 horsepower car should be. I'm not quite sure what the wizardry of that is, but it doesn't make any sense to be able to do 23.5 mpg in a car like this. To give you some more numbers, from the mileage I have done, over 4,000 miles in the centre, that has averaged 10.6. Admittedly, it's done a fair few track days. Those obviously bring down the mileage significantly. Ford GTs on something like 13 or 14, some kind of number like that. Trying to think if I can tell you off the top of my head any of the other numbers. Like I said, this is basically on a par with the Focus RS. This is about as economical as the Focus RS. Both have done a couple of Nürburgring laps, have done a really similar amount of miles actually. That's on about 8, this is 7. So similar miles, similar amount of track driving. Both have done some Autobahn stretches. Both have done some daily driving, some city driving, and both are about 24 mpg. I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by that because even though, like I said, on a car like this, you're not buying the car to be economical, I think it's something that's a relevant topic. And in the case of this, not only do you get immense performance by having the e-motors, you get ridiculous acceleration, very quick early power on out of corners, you get the ability to drive under full electric power should you wish, but you also get that added benefit, which is just a nice little bonus. And I'd be super interested to have a direct comparison with this because you're adding a massive amount of frontal area by having this up here. Even the bars, just the whole box, even though it's quite an aerodynamic box, it's a whole lot more to have to push through the air. So obviously it's going to have some kind of impact. I don't know if that's 10% or 20% or what exactly the number would be. That's one for people who are far more scientifically minded than I am, but I certainly enjoy the numbers overall and that result out of it. The SF90 is such an unreal car. Along the way, we may or may not have seen something, a future prototype, SF90 Versione Speciale, the VS, that's the code name for the track version. We may or may not have seen one of those in Maranello. So I don't know what the future of this is going to be. I've talked a bit about that while we've been on the tour. It feels like a very special car to me. My first ever new Ferrari. It's a beautiful specification, if I can say so myself. And now we have even more fun memories with it. So many, many more miles to be enjoyed with this. It's done quite a lot for its first year. Not many SF90s do 2 road trips around Europe in their first year. But I always say with the Shmuseums, these cars need to be driven. No garage queens. Garage queens just mean you aren't getting the enjoyment out of them as they deserve to be enjoyed. But we've got it back home safely. We'll swap over the winter tyres back to the summer ones at some point very soon. I will probably give it a clean down with the guys in the coming days before we take the box back off and then go over to Topaz to get the PPF done. But the PPF in general on the car has held up brilliantly. Often when I go on trips like this, there are parts that I can just see need redoing. Obviously we've got some bug splats and it's not the cleanest in the world right now, but there are very, very few little marks. Like very few, which is great because often when I've done thousands of miles on the road, we need to do something again. Just replace a piece of PPF somewhere. So very successful journey, very successful road trip. And it turns out there are no issues on the car other than it just needs its annual service because it's now about a year old. So I'll drop it off at Ferrari. It will be safely in their hands, get it serviced, get it done. It clearly just decided I walked far enough away to lock itself. As I've talked about, the walk-away locking that you can't disable, which is very, very strange. And I'll probably keep the Swiss vignette in the windscreen for a little bit longer as well, because that's always quite fun. Anyway, I think that's it for now. It's time for us to head home. It's been quite the drive from Strasbourg back here today via Reims to see the circuit and to just enjoy more miles on the road in the SF90. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Thank you for your support throughout this adventure, throughout the SF90 winter tour. It has been a mega journey, but you know what? We've got, well, one, a very standout purple car that needs a drive, coming soon, and 2, there's a yellow car in America, coming soon as well. That's it for now. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you soon. Cheers!